Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
Part 1, the room that was finally mine. The morning I finished painting the guest room, I stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It had taken me the better part of 3 weekends. Sage green walls, crisp white trim, a new daybed with a wrought iron frame I'd found at an estate sale 2 towns over. I'd hung linen curtains that caught the afternoon light and turned it honey gold. On the dresser I placed a small jade plant and a stack of paperback novels I'd been meaning to read since my 50s. A little lamp with a cream shade, a braided rug in muted blues and greens. It wasn't a guest room in the traditional sense. It was my room, a reading room, a quiet room, a room where I could close the door and simply be without being anyone's mother or grandmother or former wife. For the first time in 39 years, I lived alone. My husband Gerald had passed 2 years prior, and after 18 months of grief so thick I could barely see through it, I had begun carefully and deliberately to rebuild my life around myself. This room was part of that rebuilding. My son Elliot called that evening, which was typical. He called every Sunday at 7, reliable as sunrise, and I loved him for it. "Mom, you sound good," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm good," I told him. "I just finished the guest room. You'll have to come see it." There was a pause, barely a breath, but I'd been his mother for 34 years. I caught it. "Actually, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. Can we come next weekend? Me, Priya, and the kids." "Of course," I said, immediately meaning it. My grandchildren Rohan and little Meena were 7 and 4 respectively, and they were the particular kind of joy that reminded you why the world kept spinning. I didn't ask about the pause. I should have. Part 2, Sunday dinner. And the pause explained. They arrived Saturday morning in Elliot's silver SUV. Rohan already climbing out before the car fully stopped, Meena asleep against her car seat with her mouth open. Priya stepped out looking beautiful and tired in equal measure, her dark hair pulled back, wearing a linen dress the color of turmeric. I had always liked my daughter-in-law. That matters, I think, for the story that follows. This isn't a tale about a wicked daughter-in-law or a foolish one. Priya was sharp and funny, a pediatric occupational therapist who worked too many hours and loved my son with a fierce, steady love I recognized and respected. We weren't close in the way that some mothers and daughters-in-law are. We didn't call each other just to talk, but we were warm, we were respectful. We shared a table easily and laughed at the same things. So I want to be clear, what happened wasn't about dislike, it was about something else entirely. We spent Saturday doing what we always did. The kids ran through my backyard and found the garden hose and got completely soaked. We grilled chicken and ate outside while the mosquitoes tested our patience. After bedtime, the three of us adults sat on the porch with glasses of wine and everything felt easy and right. Sunday morning, after the children were settled with cartoons and pancakes, Elliot looked at Priya and she looked at him, and I felt it again. That pause now stretched into something visible. Elliot started, "We want to talk to you about something." Set down my coffee, he explained it carefully. The company he worked for had offered him a position in their Austin office, a significant promotion, a meaningful raise, a genuine opportunity. They'd been thinking about it for 2 months. They decided to take it. They were moving to Texas. I absorbed this. Texas, 1,400 miles. "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it even through the pang. "Elliot, that's really wonderful," he exhaled. "Thanks, Mom. There's one more thing," and here Priya leaned forward. "My mother," she said carefully. "You know she lives alone in Fairfield. Since my dad passed, she's been by herself, and with us moving so far away," she stopped, gathered herself. "She can't afford to stay in her place much longer, and we can't afford to fly back every few months to check on her, especially with the move costs. We were thinking," she looked around my kitchen. Through the archway you could see the hallway that led to the guest room. "You have so much space here," she continued. "And we thought if she moved in with you, you'd have company, you wouldn't be alone. She's lovely, you'd really like her." I stared at her, she smiled. The smile was genuine, it was kind. It was also the smile of someone who had already in their mind solved a problem. "Perfect," she said almost to herself, looking toward the hallway again. "My mother will love it, we're moving in." There was a silence that sat on the table between us like something solid. "No," I said. Part 3. What no meant. The word landed differently than I expected, not with a thud but with a kind of echo, like a stone dropped into still water. Priya's smile faltered. Not collapsed, faltered. She was a reasonable person. She heard the word and processed it, but I could see she hadn't truly anticipated it. "Mom," Elliot started. "Me say this clearly," I said, and I was proud of how steady my voice was, because I don't want there to be any confusion. "I love you both. I love Rohan and Meena more than I can say, and I'm sure Priya's mother is a wonderful woman, but my answer is no. We just," Elliot said, "let me finish." I picked up my coffee, not because I wanted it, but because having something in my hands helped me stay calm. "For 39 years I shared this house. With your father, with you, with whatever the moment required. When Gerald got sick, I organized my entire life around his care, and I did it willingly because I loved him. When he died, I spent a year and a half barely functioning. I want you to understand what it cost me to get to where I am right now, to paint that room, to sleep through the night, to feel like myself again. That didn't happen by accident, I built that." Priya said quietly, "We're not asking you to give that up. You're asking a woman you've never met to move into my home," I said, "without asking me, without talking to me about it first. You two made this decision and you came here to present it to me. That's not a conversation, that's an announcement." Elliot had the grace to look ashamed. Priya was still processing. I didn't mean it that way, she said. I know you didn't, I genuinely believe that, but intention and impact aren't the same thing. I set the mug down. What I heard when you described this plan is that my home is a solution to your problem, that because I have space and because I'm alone, I'm available, and I need you to understand that I don't experience my solitude as a vacancy waiting to be filled. 4. The conversation that followed what came next was hard. Hard in the way that necessary things often are. Elliot argued, gently at first, then with more feeling. He said he worried about me. He said the house was too big for one person. He said it would be good for me to have someone around. Each of these statements, I noticed, was framed around what would be good for me, but none of them had originated from a question he'd actually asked me. Have you ever asked me if I wanted company? I said. He was quiet. When did you decide the house was too big? Find it just right. I looked at him with the particular focus of a mother who has spent decades learning her child's deflections. Elliot, is this actually about me? Or is this about the guilt you feel about moving to Austin? He opened his mouth, closed it, because if you feel guilty about leaving, that's valid. That's something to sit with. But the solution to your guilt is not to install a stranger in my house so you can feel better about being 1,400 miles away. Priya had gone very still. She was a perceptive woman. I could see her rearranging things internally. My mother really does need help, she said finally. Her voice had changed, the negotiating brightness was gone. She sounded simply true. I'm scared for her, I don't know what to do, and this is the moment I felt for her because it was real, because I understood it. Then let's talk about that, I said. Genuinely, what does your mother need? What are the options? I'm not the solution, but maybe I can help you think through what is. We talked for another 2 hours, part 5. What I learned about Nirmala: her name was Nirmala. She was 68, which made her 3 years younger than me. She had come to the United States from Gujarat in her late 20s with Priya's father, a civil engineer named Suresh, who had died of a heart attack 4 years ago. She had worked most of her adult life in accounting, retired at 65, and now lived in a rental apartment in Fairfield, Connecticut, where she knew her neighbors vaguely and spent most of her time on video calls with her sister in Ahmedabad. She had a bad knee. She was a meticulous cook. She grew tomatoes on her balcony every summer. She was, by Priya's account, deeply proud and deeply private, and would almost certainly be horrified to know that her daughter had tried to arrange housing for her without her knowledge. Does she know you were going to ask me this? I said. Priya winced. Not exactly, Priya. She would have said no to the whole idea. Then why did you think I would say yes when she wouldn't even say yes? There was no good answer to that. Priya knew it. I think, she said slowly, I was hoping if you agreed she could be presented with a fait accompli, so she wouldn't have to feel like a burden by refusing. She paused. I can see now how that logic is. It's a lot, I agreed. Yeah. We sat together in a silence that had become somehow less hostile. Elliot was looking out the window. Rohan had appeared in the doorway asking for juice, and I got up and got it for him, and the tiny interruption did something to reset the room. When I sat back down, I said, I'll tell you what I can offer. I'll meet her. If you want to bring her here for a weekend sometime before you move, I'll have her as a proper guest. We can see if we even like each other. And if we do, if there's genuine warmth there, then maybe we can talk about something different. Maybe we see if she'd want to live nearby, not with me, but close. Maybe she'd like this area. Maybe we become friends, I don't know. But it starts with treating her like a person with agency, not a package to be placed. Priya looked at me for a long moment. Right, she said. It cost her something, I could tell. You're completely right. Elliot reached across the table and covered my hand with his. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Part 6. The visit. 6 weeks later, Nirmala came for a weekend. I was nervous, which surprised me. I'd made a pot of chai from a recipe Priya texted me, and then second-guessed myself and made regular coffee as well, and then stood in my kitchen feeling silly about being nervous. She arrived with Priya, a small rolling suitcase, and an expression I recognized immediately. The pride armor of someone who suspects they are about to be pitied and has pre-armored against it. I knew that look because I had worn it myself. Your home is very nice, she said formally at the door. Thank you, I said. Come in. Can I make you tea or coffee? I made chai, but I don't know if I did it right. She stepped inside and looked at me with cautious amusement. You made chai? Priya sent me a recipe. She set down her bag, folded her hands, and said, let me see this chai. She tasted it, tilted her head critically, added a small pour from the pot back into the pan, adjusted the heat, and waited 2 minutes. Then she poured it properly and handed me a cup. It tasted completely different. Better. More ginger, she said, and you took it off too early. Noted, I said. She almost smiled. We walked in my garden that afternoon. She crouched down slowly, protecting her knee, and looked at my tomato plants with professional interest, pointed out where I'd been underwatering, pinched a sucker off one stem without asking, and then looked up with the expression of someone who has just done something impolite. Sorry, she said. Please don't be, I said. They obviously needed it. She stood carefully. We looked at the garden together. Priya told you about their plan, she said. It wasn't a question. She did. You said no. I did. She nodded slowly. Good, she said. I looked at her. I would have said no also, she said, to living with a stranger, even a nice stranger. A pause. You are a nice stranger. You're growing on me, I said. This time she did smile. Small and real epilogue. What home means. Elliot and Priya moved to Austin in March. The going away party was tearful and funny, and the children were bewildered, and Meena fell asleep under the dining room table at 8:30 with a paper crown still on her head from a game we'd played. Nirmala did not move into my house. She found a one-bedroom apartment 11 minutes from me in a small complex with a garden plot available for residents. She negotiated the plot before she signed the lease, which I found entirely admirable. She moved in April with a series of very particular instructions to the movers about which boxes were fragile. We have dinner together on Thursdays. She is teaching me to cook properly. I am teaching her to use the library's digital lending system. We disagree, sometimes sharply, about television, politics, and the correct way to stake a tomato plant. We video call Priya and Elliot together sometimes on Sundays, and there is something deeply satisfying about watching Priya's face when she sees us side by side, not because her plan worked, but because something better than her plan worked last week. Nirmala knocked on my door on a Tuesday unscheduled, which is unusual, and held up 2 mangoes and said, "These were perfect at the store. I bought 4 and you should have 2. I took the mangoes. You want to stay for coffee?" I said. She considered. 20 minutes, she said. I have to call my sister. She stayed for 2 hours. I think about the room sometimes, the sage green room, the linen curtains, the jade plant. It is still mine. It is still quiet and still and full of afternoon light. Nirmala has not slept in it, not even once. But sometimes, sitting across from her at my kitchen table, both of us with our hands wrapped around mugs, some argument about something minor sharpening pleasantly between us, I think about what I was protecting when I said no, and what I was making room for without knowing it when I said let's start differently. My home is not a vacancy. But it was never meant to be a fortress either. Somewhere between those two things, I think, is where the rest of my life is being lived.